Hey now Brawlers, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and today we're going to take a look at Shadowrun Crossfire from Catalyst Game Labs. And I am not going to hold up the entire box because the cards are going to go everywhere, so you'll just have to live with the top part of the box. But this is Catalyst Game Labs' newest game, and it's part of, they're the current license holders for the Shadowrun RPG, which I'll get to in a second. But this is supposed to be one of the games they released in the year of Shadowrun. There's going to be a miniatures game, there's going to be another large board game, and some other stuff as well. Of course, Catalyst Game Labs counts their years in 24 to 36 month increments, so unlike the rest of the world. So don't count on seeing those other games anytime soon. But this is a cooperative deck building game set in the Shadowrun universe. It's a purely cooperative game, actually, where you'll all take control of the Shadowrunners, the runners from the Shadowrun universe, and try to go on missions. And it's one of the current hotness of games, or I should say the fad of games, where you can actually upgrade your characters over time, much like the Pathfinder adventure card game, or even games like Descent, where you just get better every time you go on missions. You upgrade, you get new stuff, you can spend your karma, which is experience points, in order to get upgrades, and you're going to need them because the missions are going to get exceedingly more difficult. If you're not familiar with the Shadowrun universe, by the way, it's a cyberpunk / fantasy universe. It takes place in the far future, not too far, but far enough future of our world, where mega corporations have come to basically rule over the entire world. And there's high technology, like there's a Matrix that's actually surprisingly like the Matrix from the movies that people can jack into, and there are deckers and things like that. But also magic has reawoken in the world. I'm not sure if reawoken is a word, but it is. That's what happens. And dragons have come back. There are people that can now use magic. A certain percentage of the Earth's population have turned into humans, have turned into elves and dwarves and orcs and trolls and other types of monsters and creatures. Some animals have turned into different types of mythological and fantasy creatures. And this is the world that you're born into. You play a runner who are like the dregs of society, who have decided that they want something more, whether it's money, fame, revenge, whatever it might be. But you work underneath in the shadows, trying to subvert the mega corporations, working for your Mr. Johnson, which is the catch-all term that runners use for the person that's hiring them, who is often someone who's working for another mega corporation, hiring runners to go against their rivals, and so on and so forth. It's always dangerous, it's always a challenge, and the Shadowrun Crossfire game is definitely that. So before I say any more, let's go through a brief overview of how the game works, then we're going to come back and I'll give you my final thoughts. Okay, I'm going to give you a brief overview of Shadowrun Crossfire. This is a purely cooperative deck building game for 1 to 4 players. If you play with less than 4 players, you may have to play with additional roles. Otherwise, the rules of the game are exactly the same. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Shadowrun universe, each of the players is going to take control of a runner. Runners are people that go beneath the grid or off the grid, and they go out on illegal missions working for the heads of the mega corporations who rule this dystopian future. This is a mix of cyberpunk and fantasy and such. All the artwork and items and things that you get during the game reflect that. So you could have a really cool cyber sniper rifle next to a lightning bolt spell. Those are the type of things that you do. And you have all kinds of different fantasy races like elves, orcs, dwarves, and of course humans. So at the beginning of the game, the first thing you're going to do is decide what your mission is, or otherwise known as a run. This is the starting mission, so this is how we're going to teach the game. This is Crossfire. This is the normal difficulty. The other 2 missions that come with the game are advanced difficulty, and I'll show you those real quick. You have the extraction mission, which is also going to make use of a special client card that I have around here somewhere. You also have the dragon fight, which is probably the most difficult mission, of course, because you're fighting a dragon and it comes with its own special dragon cards. But for this walkthrough or a brief explanation, we'll just use the Crossfire card. Now, there'll be a little blurb at the top here explaining kind of a little bit of backstory as to what this is, the number of players, the difficulty, and then your goal in the mission. We'll also have special setups setup. For instance, how many obstacles will come out to face the runners, how the game is going to end, and what happens during the different scenes of the game. And then it'll also have on the backside your different karma awards. Karma is the experience you use in this game to actually level up your characters. So the goal for the original Crossfire scenario is simply to go through 3 scenes of the game. A scene is determined by having obstacles in front of each of the players. Obstacles are the foes and setbacks that you're going to have to fight in order to get through a run. The theme of the Crossfire is just that you're on a run and it kind of went south and now you have to get out of there. So once you complete 3 scenes, there's no obstacles left in front of everyone, you will win the scene and you'll get to award yourself karma and move on to the next game. When you award yourself karma, you may get to upgrade your characters, but we'll get to that in a second. So once you choose your mission, each player that's playing the game, up to 4 players, will choose a meta type. These are the races, the characters that you'll be playing. And there's a lot of different ones to choose from. There's elves, and there's humans, and trolls. Most of these cards are actually male and female of the same type. They have the same stats, and it also lets you play the game, add some longevity to the game, because once you totally fill up the upgrade slots, which are these, where you would put the stickers that you permanently upgrade, you can start over with a new character sheet. The important thing is here, you have the hit points up at the top of the sheet. This circled of green here indicates the max health of the character. So when you're actually playing the game, you'll put this little max health marker there, and then you'll use this other marker on top of it to slide down to where your actual health is as you take damage. It's kind of silly. I don't know why they do it that way, but so be it. And it also tells you when you get staggered and when you get critical, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Sorry for the glare, by the way. Down here you'll have different stats that each character will start with, and these are different for all the different meta types. So the first one is just the max health again. I told you it's kind of silly. Then it's your starting hand, how many cards you're going to be allowed to start off with at the start of a mission, and then starting Nuyen. Nuyen is the money in the game that you're going to use to purchase more cards, because remember, this is a deck building game. So once you have your meta type, once you have your mission, then it's time to choose your role. There's 4 different roles in the game, and each player is going to choose one of the roles. You'll take one of these cards indicating what that role is. You have the Street Samurai, the Mage, the Decker, and the Face. In Dungeons & Dragons terms, this would be the Fighter, the Wizard, the Rogue, I guess, and, well, I don't know, Rogue and Cleric. I guess it doesn't really apply to Dungeons & Dragons, but they all fit a different role. They all have different specialties in the Shadowrun role-playing game, at least. So you'll take one of those, and then you're going to get your starting deck of cards. Now, every player is going to start with the same 4 cards, 4 basic cards in their deck, but each role starts with an additional 3 copies of one of those cards, depending on what your role is, and it all makes sense. So the 4 cards are Mark, which is a hacking term, Mana, Street Smarts, and Quick Shot. Now you'll notice that the colors and the symbols also correspond to those 4 role cards. Well, that's because, you know, that's what you do. So if you're the Decker, you're going to start off with 3 extra copies of Mark, because that's your specialty. If you're the Street Samurai, you have 3 extra copies of Quick Shot. In any case, you're going to have 7 cards to start off with. You'll shuffle that up, put it face down, and then you'll draw whatever your starting hand is as indicated by your meta type card. And then the game is going to begin. This is assuming that you're starting off from fresh, and there's no other extra peripheral, that's a word, things that you have to do for setup. So you'll draw your starting hand, the game's going to begin. Now, the first thing that you're going to do at the start of the scenario, depending on what the mission guidelines are put obstacles in front of people. So for the Crossfire, you're going to draw a number of obstacles equal to the number of runners. These are the 2 obstacle decks. You have one that has a single bullet hole on it, and you have one that has 2 bullet holes. So that's normal and difficult, respectively. And depending on how you're starting the game, you'll draw from that deck, and you're going to draw 1 obstacle for every runner that is in the game. And you'll put them in, the first one that you draw, you're going to match up the color of the obstacle to whoever's got the particular role. So this one here has a blue color, which means it's the Mage role. So if the Mage role is in the game, which it probably should be, because even if you're playing with less players, someone should have that extra role, it's going to go in front of them first, and then every other obstacle is going to go clockwise from there, potentially even doubling up on obstacles for some of the tougher scenes in the game. So once the obstacles are out in front of the players, then the game will begin. Now, depending on the number of players and runners that you have, you may also have to start off drawing Crossfire event cards. But we'll get back to those in a second. Let's explain the obstacles. Now, each obstacle is going to look mostly the same with a couple of differences. So up in the top is the challenges that you have to surpass in order to defeat this obstacle. So this is a spell sniper. The corporation has sent a spell sniper after you, and you have to deal with it. Each of these are different combinations of cards, symbols that you have to play. And that's what these basic cards that you start the game with represent. Each of them, while it looks like a big grandiose card with a lot of stuff on it, really it's just this symbol up in the top for your basic cards that you're worrying about. In this case, it's a gun. In this case, it's a lightning bolt, a mana symbol, the negotiation skill symbol, and the hacking symbol. So you need to get these combinations of cards in order to take out the specific challenges that this obstacle represents. Now, anytime there's a number with a gray circle, that can be any type of symbol. It's kind of a wild card. But then others will be more specialized, like a mana symbol. This one is 4 of anything, and this one is another mana symbol. So obviously, since it's a spell sniper, you need to fight magic with magic. This one requires both 2 different types of symbols. So you have some generic symbols you can spend, but then you need a face symbol, the skill symbol, and then another mana symbol as well. So you need to get that combination. You'll have these little damage tracks here, which at the start are going to start off of the card, but as you manage to get through the different challenges by playing cards, you'll move them on each level, signifying that you've actually taken out those levels. So for instance, if I want to get through the first level of the Spell Sniper, when it's my turn, I'll decide which card I want to actually use against it. I'll play it down, get the symbol, and blow through its first level and move it there. Now I got to play a mana symbol, and you can play as many cards as you want, as you're capable of doing, that would actually help you on your turn. So now I can blow through the next level as well. Of course, you can always play cards on another person's obstacle, which you might have to do in order to win the game. If you can't do enough damage to kill your own obstacle, but you might be able to help someone else kill an obstacle, that might be what you have to do. You might have to take a hit at the end of the turn, which I'll get to in a second, just to help out somebody else. Now, not every card is built the same. Some of them actually have special abilities as well. So down at the bottom of this one, for the Spell Sniper, it says flipped, which means that when you flip the card over, each runner places 2 cards from the top of their deck into their discard. If a runner has less than 2 cards in their deck, they don't reshuffle or discard more. And there's a lot of different special abilities like that. Some of them only kick off if the Crossfire level, which I haven't explained yet, is at a certain point. Also up in the top corner of the card, you have Nuyen. This is how much Nuyen is going to be dispensed to the party in as even a way as possible once this obstacle is defeated. So if you're the one that defeats it, you're going to get a Nuyen. Then it's going to go clockwise from you, and everyone gets a Nuyen, possibly circling back around. So if it's an odd number, then you'll be the one that gets the extra remaining Nuyen. Then, down in the other bottom corner, the nastiest out of them all, this is their strength. This is how much damage they're going to deal to you at your end of your turn if you're not able to defeat it. If that's the case, you're going to have to move your damage marker down, and that's bad, of course, and it's not easy to heal in this game. If you ever go down to staggered level, you're going to have to discard, or I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. You're going to have to shuffle your entire deck, hand, and discard pile together, and that's it. At the start of your turn, you're only allowed to draw 1 card. That makes it really, really difficult to get anything done. Then, no matter how much damage you take, if you're not at staggered already, you only go to staggered. But then if you take damage again, you go to critical, which at that point, the mission is aborted. You finish out the rounds, and then everyone else gets another turn, and then no matter what, the game is over, but it just matters whether or not you die if you're playing in campaign mode. You might be able to escape, but not have won the mission. So once you go through having an obstacle in front of you, having a chance to play cards, then you're going to move on to taking your damage. Then you get to draw cards. Now this is a bit unusual as most deck builders go, because you don't discard your entire hand like you normally would in a game like Dominion or Ascension. Instead, if you have 2 or fewer cards in your hand, you will draw exactly 2 cards and put them into your hand. If you do have 4 or more cards, you just don't draw cards, and you keep the cards that you have. No matter what, you keep the cards that you have. If you want to get rid of the cards that you have, you'll just play them on your turn, even if it doesn't behoove you. But in a lot of cases, it's worth it just to hold cards and hoard them for the next turn to have a better turn next time. After that, you have a chance to buy cards, because like I said, this is a deck building game. This is the black market deck, and you'll have 6 randomly allotted cards out here at the beginning, always actually, because every time that you buy a card, or someone buys a card, you'll replace it immediately. It's toward Ascension style rules. The cost of the card is up in the top corner. And once you buy it, you'll immediately put it into your hand. This is another thing that's different than most deck builders. When you buy a card, it goes directly to your hand, and then you can use it on your next turn, or potentially on another player's turn. Cards that you can play on another player's turn will say assist on the bottom, in which case you'll ignore the top text, which you would only get if it was your turn, and then you only get the bottom part. So negotiation here, even the cards that you buy from the market will also give you the basic symbols. Some of them actually give you more than that. So, well, let me go back to negotiation and show you assist. Its normal ability says that the next time you buy a skill card this turn, you pay 1 less Nuyen for each skill card you played this turn. But if you play it as an assist on someone else's turn, the current runner can pay 1 less Nuyen for the next card you buy this turn, and they get damage to dispense of 1 skill and 1 of any kind. So that's really good if you play it either way, but especially if you play it as an assist. Death Touch here is going to give you 2 mana symbols and X, where you're going to reveal the top 3 cards of your deck when you play this card, then put them on top of your deck in any order. X equals the number of spell cards revealed this way. And this is where you can sort of specialize in things. So obviously, this card is going to be more powerful for a mage or anyone else who has been buying a lot of different magic cards. You're not limited in the cards you can buy based on your role. Some cards are a little tricky to buy because they might say that it requires that you have played a spell already in order to just purchase the card. But otherwise, you can sort of specialize however you want, no matter what your role is. There are healer cards, which are few and far between. So the Dock Wagon contract says you can choose a runner. That runner heals 2 hit points. If you play it as an assist, you can choose a runner. They heal 1 hit point, but they also get a skill damage to use. And this is how you're going to play the game. You're going to be using these cards to not only power yourself, but to help out your allies, because you're all in this together. And if someone dies, it's going to be game over, so you need to work together in that regard. Once you buy a card, it's going to go to the next player, and that's it. Now, what I haven't explained yet, probably one of the most important things, are the Crossfire events. You're going to be drawing these every round unless you're playing with less runners than you should be, in which case you might have to skip the first couple of rounds. But normally you'll draw a Crossfire event card and do whatever it says at the start of a round, not a turn. So whoever's the first player, every time it gets back to them, it's the first thing you're going to do. So let's take a look at this one I just randomly drew here. Separated. Whenever you see an infinity symbol, that just means it's always on. This one is runners can't play cards during another runner's turn. That's pretty bad. Now this one has the infinity symbol, but it's got a number and a crosshairs. Now what does that mean? That is referring to the Crossfire level. The Crossfire level are the number of Crossfire cards currently in the discard pile. Every time that a new new Crossfire event comes out, the old one goes into the discard pile. If there are not that many cards in the discard pile, you don't have to worry about this ability at all. And in fact, at the end of a scene, once everyone's eliminated all of their obstacles, whatever the current Crossfire event card is, you're going to shove that underneath the bottom of the deck, and it won't go to the discard. But if you're not, but that means it's sort of an incentive to get through the scene as quickly as possible, because you don't want cards in the discard, because it means that more and more cards that you draw are going to get worse and worse. Here's another example, No Holding Back. This one doesn't have a Crossfire level ability. This one just says, each turn immediately before the draw and buy step, the current runner takes 1 damage for each card in their hand. So this incentivizes you to dump your entire hand every turn. I'll show you one more example. Let me show you one more with the Crossfire event. Here we go. Enemy Tactics. Always on. When an obstacle attacks a runner, it heals a number of levels equal to its attack strength. That's really bad. If the Crossfire level is 5 or more, instead of only that obstacle healing, each obstacle heals a number of levels equal to that obstacle's attack strength. So it just makes enemies blisteringly hard. So the game incentivizes you to get through scenes as quickly as possible so that you're drawing and discarding less and less of those. That's really the game. It's actually a fairly simple game. The complexity of the game comes through the different mission parameters, upgrading your character and such. So I will show you a few of those upgrade sheets. Let's start with some of the lower end ones here. By the way, I have not put any stickers on my characters yet. I've played the game a lot, but I just haven't wanted to deal with putting stickers on at this time. So here we have a few here. In training, when you have enough karma, you don't spend karma, you just meet a threshold. So when you've met the threshold of 5 karma, at the end of a mission, you're able to use some of these. So in training says you can increase your starting cards by 1. Got Your Back says that once a game you can pay 3 Nuyen to heal a staggered runner of 1 hit point. Combat Fu says once during your turn you can substitute 2 of any damage type for a gun when applying damage, and there's a upgrade for each different damage type that functions just like that. Let's look at some of the higher end ones. You have ones like the Long View. You can buy cards from the black market discard pile. Jack of Everything. When you play 3 or more cards of another runner's main role color in a turn, that runner draws a card. Oh my. When you play a card on another runner's turn, that card deals +1 damage. So you have a lot of different ways to upgrade your character and individualize your character however you like. And whenever you put an upgrade, this is a promo character, by the way, that starts with a upgrade automatically built in. But if you don't like a particular upgrade after you purchase it, you come to find it's not that useful, or you just don't like it, you can always cover it up with another sticker. Remember that you don't spend karma, you're just meeting a threshold. But you do have to make sure that your upgrades don't surpass that threshold. So if I had, and each one above 1 actually adds 10 to the cost. So let's say that I just want to put 1 upgrade. As long as I can meet whatever that number is on the cost, well, that's fine. But for every other upgrade I have, it's just higher and higher of a threshold that I need to meet. It's a little confusing, but that's the main selling point of the game, is that you're constantly upgrading your characters and getting better as you go on some missions. Given the fact that there's only 3 missions, you're actually going to go on those missions several times, of course, until expansions come out. And that's really it. You're just trying to work together, defeat as many obstacles as you can so that they don't kill you, get through each scene, buy cards, make yourself stronger, and make sure that your run is successful. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. Now, every conversation about any Shadowrun card or board game is going to have to start with the theme. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I've played 2 different editions of Shadowrun. The current edition, which I think is 5th edition, it's been about a year, and also the previous edition from a number of years ago. I've played both those. I actually ran the campaign for that last edition version of the game, and I enjoy the world quite a bit. I even remember playing the old Super Nintendo version of Shadowrun way back in the day when I was a little kid. So I really enjoy the world. I like the idea of having it both be cyberpunk and fantasy, because I think I like fantasy a little bit more than any kind of high science fiction setting, but the two mixed together, it can get a bit cheesy at times when you see a troll running around with goggles and a machine gun and hacking into a network. It's a little bit cheesy, but once you get past that, once you get really immersed in the setting, it's very, very cool. So, you know, if you like the setting and the theme of Shadowrun, if you've either played the RPG, read some of the novels and things like that, you're probably going to get more enjoyment and be more attracted to this game than most people. And in fact, in the box, I didn't show it, but there's a booklet that'll actually tell you a little bit more information about the Shadowrun world. So for the uninitiated, for people that just need a refresher because maybe they played the really old editions from the 80s and 90s, that'll help you get up to speed. There's even like a little pocket novel that comes with the game, like a short story that you can read as well. I will caution you on this, though. If you're attracted to this game because of that theme and you're like, whoa, Shadowrun in board game form, that's so cool, I wouldn't call it the most thematic game ever. Yeah, the theme is there. You got this really cool artwork, and you're going on missions that are like extraction and trying to meet the demands of your client, and there's a dragon, and all the cards look very thematic, and you're using spells and things like that, but nevertheless, it's not like the RPG at all. I wouldn't even say that it's as much of an RPG as the Pathfinder Adventure card game. Really, it just comes down to card and hand management, and even when you're doing spells, it doesn't feel that much different than when you're just using your gun traits and using those kind of special cards from the black market. So I would caution you on that. Don't expect this to be a deeply immersive storytelling experience. As far as I'm concerned, that's not really what this is. So the Shadowrun theme is just going to help you kind of be like, oh, cool, maybe you'll feel nostalgic if you haven't played the game for a while, or it's just going to be that extra little bit that might push you over the edge towards getting this game, but it's not going to be, it shouldn't be the major selling point here. It should be the gameplay. So let's go ahead and talk about that. So I'm very partial to deck building games. Most people know that about me that pay attention to my channel. And this one has a very odd form of deck building, one that I actually think I like, because I'm always looking for games that change up the deck building mechanic in a way from the typical Ascension and Dominion style games. I think those are like the two main branching this is very weird, I won't do that again. The main branching parts of the deck building genre, the Ascension style and the Dominion style. This leans more towards Ascension, but you have much more control over what you're doing. You don't dump your hand at the beginning of each turn. Everyone has a different starting hand too, depending on what meta type you're playing as. You don't dump your hand at the end of each turn, I should say, and you only draw a very fixed amount of cards, and you might not draw at all. If you have 3 or fewer cards, you'll draw 2. If you have more than that, you don't draw. But you may choose to play cards you don't necessarily need to play in order to draw more cards, or you may hoard up your hand and try to get as many cards as possible and save them until the next turn to have a better turn. And every time that you buy a card, you get to put it directly into your hands and use it on your next turn. So you have much more control in this game than most deck builders, which is a very interesting concept. It's still very much a deck builder, but on the other hand, I think that people who are turned off by the total randomness at times of some deck builders they might like this one a bit more. So that's a good selling point, and I think it works well here. The idea of the obstacles is also a neat thing. Because what it really is kind of set collection, right? Because you're trying to get a certain set of cards in order to get through the different levels of each of these obstacles. And it's really hard. This game is super difficult. Unless I'm missing something. I've played this several times now, many times. It is very, very tough, and that whole concept of not just being able to play on your cards, trying to get through the levels of your obstacles, and possibly more than one, which is really really difficult, but also being able to play on someone else's obstacles, that I think is where this game shines the most. It's where the pure co-op nature of it really comes out. You cannot hot dog it in this game. You cannot say, well, I'm just going to try to get these awesome cards because I want to have the best deck possible. If you do not work with the other players, and not just in building your decks in the right way, but overcoming these obstacles, you will lose, and you will lose hard, okay? You need to constantly be looking at not just what's in front of you, but what's on other players. You could say, okay, I could play this and this card and just knock a couple levels off my person. I won't be able to kill this obstacle in front of me, but it's okay, I'll work on it. Take a couple points of damage and move on. But instead, you could look at the next player, or even the next player after that, and say, well, I can't get through my obstacle anyways, so why don't I play these cards on someone else, and maybe by working together, when it comes to their turn, they can destroy that obstacle before they take damage. They won't take damage in their turn, we'll get some money, then we might be able to buy better cards, and maybe I'll have to get hit again at the end of my turn, but at least we've dealt with more obstacles. This is the kind of thinking you have to do, and it's what I like the most about this game. By far, is that you are forced to strategically think with the other players. There's constant interaction between the other players. It's not just on your turn being able to play cards on other people. You have the assist cards. You're constantly discussing what the best option is, and it never gets bogged down in the groupthink that other games like Pandemic might, because you're not, first off, you're not allowed to show what your hand is. You can only discuss it. It's sort of that Sentinels of the Multiverse type role where you're fully cooperating, but you can't show everyone. Your deck is your deck, your character is your character, you're going to do what you're going to do, but you can discuss it, but ultimately you have total control, and at a certain point you just say, this is what I'm doing, but you have to learn to work together. I think that works very, very well, and it needs to because the game is so tough. The Crossfire events thing, the game working against you, is very neat. It's a little innovative. I haven't seen anything quite like it, where the Crossfire level is determined by the number of cards, but it's a bit of a timer. The faster you go through a scene, the better you're going to do because you're able to nix the current event, put it back under the deck, and if you can do that before the discard pile gets too big, it's going to get easier for you down the road, but you're not always capable of doing that because those obstacles can be so brutally tough. And I think that's going to lead into the first major criticism I have of this game. I don't mind a challenge. I certainly don't. The fact that I still have Robinson Crusoe on my shelf and Yggdrasil and Ghost Stories should tell you that I can be a bit of a masochist when it comes to my cooperative games. But this game has a very steep barrier to entry because of that difficulty level. You are going to get pounded, and you are going to get pounded hard the first few times that you play this. And especially if you're constantly playing with new people who are just not, no matter how skilled they are, they're not going to understand just how important it is to work together. And that can be really tough. You are just going to get pounded hard and be like, whoa, it feels like we didn't accomplish anything. The game is over before we even really got started. You might get through that first scene and then limp into scene 2 and just get decimated. And while you have control over your own deck, you have no control over what's coming out of that obstacle deck. And even in the normal level 1 obstacles, the 1-bullet obstacles, there are enemies that you might draw right at the beginning of the game that are as tough as the hard difficulty ones. They're just randomly sprinkled throughout that first deck, and you'll get stuck with this thing in front of you and be like, what? How do I even deal with this? And you will be down to your last levels of health going into the next scene. That is really tough. The times that we have won this game have been by the skin of our teeth. And while that can be exhilarating in some instances, at times it can be just frustrating, like what did we even do? So that is a complaint that I have about the game. Another thing is the missions. Now, I've heard people come down on both sides of this. There's not enough missions in the game. Or people have said, well, a normal board game that you buy has no missions. You just play the game itself. At least this one's giving you 3 different options. But I would disagree with those people and say that the whole selling point of Shadowrun Crossfire is the idea of having all these missions and going through and getting upgrading and getting these karma points and using them to buy upgrades for your character and permanently evolving your character and going on. I mean, the game itself, I mentioned I really like the cooperative aspect, but actually playing cards from your hand to get symbols and matching them up in the set collection, the little bit of deck building, while there's some neat things going on there, it's just an okay game. It's decent. It's good. It's not great. The selling point is being able to do that and then go on and progress and get stronger and have more and more challenges. And just the 3 missions in the base game doesn't feel like there's enough there, especially because in order to get strong enough to challenge one of those harder missions, you're going to have to play the same ones over and over again until you get a ton of karma, especially for that dragon mission. I haven't even gotten to that one yet. It's going to be a while. And that's kind of the problem. It's going to get somewhat repetitive going through the same mission, seeing the same things, even because the game is really just good. It only really sings when you get into those meta things. So I do have a complaint about that as well. This is definitely a game that's going to get much, much, much better with expansions. So where does that leave it? It sounds like I'm being really harsh in this game, and I don't mean to be, because from the first time I played it until the last time that I played it before this review, I really love some of the things that are going on here. I told you I love the cooperative aspects. Probably works better than almost any game I've played other than Robinson Crusoe. I like how the deck building works in here. It's not totally innovative, but it's neat. I like the theme, what there is of it, because I like Shadowrun personally, and the artwork is beautiful. I think it's reused, but who cares? It's really good. In the graphic design, things like this are all really, really good, but I don't think that this lives quite up to the promise of what the game could be. There's just not enough meat to it yet, and that difficulty is just over the top. So I think that this is a game that's going to reward persistence. You need to be willing to commit a lot of time to this in order to upgrade your characters fully. And by the way, if people that are complaining about, I can't believe I have to put stickers on my card, stop whining. That is so far out of the realm of being a real legit concern, because each character meta comes with 2 different sheets. So if you finish one, you can go through another one. You can cover up stickers if you want to. I mean, it's just not an issue. It's just totally not. They'll probably sell character packs later too, so don't worry about that. But that whole system is not fleshed out enough in this base game. It's going to need to come out through expansions. Enough to where if you're not really in love with the Shadowrun theme, if you're not really in love with deck builders and the type, you might want to wait. You might want to wait until this game has more content. It's really only a day 1 buy for people that are just in love with the theme and just are looking for something a little more innovative. But just be warned that this is a tough challenge, and it's one that you're going to have to do many, many times in order to really get the most out of the game. And by that point, you might be a little tired of what the game has to offer for you, and you're going to need those expansions. But it's a good game. There's a ton of promise here, a ton of promise, and I can't wait to see what's on the horizon if they treat it right. So I think it's going in a good direction, but it's just not quite there yet, but I am hopeful. My name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.